Okay, and like I said, I'm pretty informal on
Off.
this, so, oh, sorry, go, what, Tara?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I'm pretty informal, so, ask questions anytime. We'll just kind of go through and talk about this. This new thing, citizen development, though it's not that new, actually. You probably have met citizen developers. So real quick, Dr. Bill Brantley, my day job, I work at the Navy Inspector General's office as a senior training specialist. And then I also have been a professor, adjunct professor for the University of Louisville, Kentucky, where I come from, for 20 years. And I have been teaching at the University of Maryland. I teach communication technology and web development and political communication, which has been exciting for the last 3 years. And I also teach project management leadership. And before I got into training, I was an IT project manager. So I have all kinds of project management certifications, data science certifications, all this stuff. And, and to date myself, when I talked about citizen development, I was back in the office when we had WordPerfect, and I used to create WordPerfect macros. So if you remember those, I talk about that in my class. My students just look at me like I'm so ancient. Okay, so a citizen developer, and this is, like I said, it's kind of being recognized now. And if any of you all are members of Project Management Institute, you may have seen where they're actually offering a book, and I'll talk about that in a second. And they're going to be starting to offer certifications on citizen developers. But what a citizen developer is essentially a user. They're usually not IT, but they have some programming knowledge. They have some, skills. In most offices, you usually know this person is that Excel spreadsheet guy, or that, person that can kind of do a little bit of programming with the different, Word and Office things. So when this first came out, like I said, WordPerfect, and then when Microsoft Word and, you had Microsoft Office and people could create macros, and that's the kind of person you would go to. So they basically would create stuff for people. And I know this in the federal government, you probably run into this too. There's a lot of offices that have an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database that runs a lot of things. And I used to work at Office Personnel Management, and it scared me sometimes how a lot of our crucial data was in someone's Excel spreadsheet that we would pass around that file. And one of my big things, being a knowledge management person, was like, oh, we need to make sure this is shared. And, we had a little bit of, in one of these instances, we had one thing where it was a special rates program. Okay. And I'm telling you guys this, between you and me and whoever else is watching this recording, it was all on a Access database at the time, which if we ever lost that, we would lose the program. Scared the death out of me. So that's why I started moving that around and getting stuff. But you can see that sometimes in offices, where you have a lot of your information on these standalone devices. And as knowledge managers, right, Tara, we talked about this before, it's crazy because you never know who has it or how to control it. So nowadays, thanks to these great tools, we can even cause more destruction and issues, because now people can build things with Tableau. They can build things with these mobile apps, kind of click and point. And there's this whole thing of low code and no code. And let me pause here real quick. How many of you all have heard of low code and no code?
Yeah.
Low code or no code. And give you a great example, you can go into Google right now, and there's something called AppSheet. And you can create interactive mobile applications off an Excel spreadsheet or whatever you have. And you can create a nice little mobile application for yourself. And you don't have to know really any programming. It's just point and click, drag things onto this little canvas, and hey, you've got an app. And they've got a quick little tutorial. If you want to show off for your kids or show off for your friends, you can build a national parks app that can display on their phone and give them great facts about the national parks. And you didn't have to program a thing.
You said that was Google?
Google AppSheet. AppSheet, yeah.
Sheets.
APPS, yeah, sheet, SHEET. Yeah. If you got a Google account, it's free. Have fun with it. Yeah.
Thanks.
But the thing is scary is I've seen people kind of go to that, and then, all of a sudden now you've got this app that everyone in the department depends on, or in the enterprise. Okay. So this is what a citizen developer does. They're not really usually with IT, but they know a little bit more about the programming language. And nowadays, it's not even that problem. You can just do some low code stuff. Now, how big is this market? According to Gartner, And y'all know Gartner research. In 2022, this is going to be a $21.2 billion market. And there's a lot of players right now. Microsoft is coming out there. They just launched a language called FX. And if you've ever dealt with Microsoft's Power Business Intelligence platform, they have all these things in here. And you can build mobile apps that have artificial intelligence that can talk to Alexa. And no, Alexa, I'm not talking to you. Okay, and you can build all the just lit up. And you can build all kinds of great things. So Microsoft's jumping in there big time. Google is, of course. Apple is doing this. So you have all these different companies that are seeing a real big market. And the reason is we don't have enough IT developers right now. That's very sought after. And a lot of companies, and I'll be honest, was bad for this too. I didn't want to sit around and wait for an IT developer to get stuff done. So I would just build a lot of applications on my own in the office. And being an IT project manager, I knew how to code, but now I see folks that don't really know how to code, which is kind of a problem. They think they do, but they can't, and are building these things and running offices with them. So by 2023, this is according to Gartner again, Gartner research, half of all the enterprises, okay, and they're talking about enterprises, commercial, public, all this, they're estimating citizen developers will build an estimated 450 million apps. And I think this might even be lower, because once people start realizing what they can do, and let's be honest, how many of you have had problems with the IT development department? You try to get something developed and it takes forever. I know I was an IT project manager. I was on the other end of that. Right? And just can I just not do it myself? And you got people that are doing it themselves. Mm-hmm. So you got IT, we don't have enough IT developers. We don't have enough data scientists. And some folks, they go to YouTube University, or if we're lucky, they go to the better LinkedIn Learning University, and they're teaching themselves these skills. Okay. So I want to pause here real quick. Any comments, any questions? Is this frightening to you guys?
No, it's so true. And SharePoint is another place where, everybody's creating their own applications on SharePoint. So, yeah, but the spreadsheet was really scary. The things they could do at FDA on spreadsheets was amazing.
Yeah, I used to be one of those spreadsheet folks. Actually, when I went to one job, I just kept hiding the fact I knew how to use Excel, because when I told people that, all I would do all day is build their spreadsheets. And, I never got to my own work. So this is what's going on here. So I want to tell you a citizen development horror story, okay? And the reason why is I want to set the stage here for why knowledge management is so needed. Because again, and Tara, I've done a lot of talks about, oh my gosh, we need knowledge management in Discipline Agile. We need knowledge management here. It's like people rush off and they do things and they forget about, oh, we're creating knowledge and we're creating best practices. Shouldn't we capture this? Yeah, so Tara knows.
Okay.
So
the forgotten piece.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, how do we do this again? Yeah, one of the big things when I had my IT project team, and I used to drive them crazy, but we had lessons learned. I always make sure we had lessons learned. We had a repository. We could recreate what we did, because I've seen a lot of projects out there that he didn't do it. So I'm not going to say the name of the company or where it was. I'm just going to say, we're going to just, what was the phrase there? Preserve the innocent or something like that, in Dragnet. Okay. So I worked at this place and I was a supervisor, kind of working with some folks on some different applications. And we had a COBOL mainframe and it had all our records that we needed to work with. And before I came in there was this gentleman who did this work, and he would download a text file. Because any of y'all ever worked with COBOL?
No, when I was in web development, there was one man who did the COBOL developing, and he retired, and they ended up bringing him back.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
we still needed him. He was the only person who knew it.
So it was, so I know a little COBOL because I kind of hit that tail end there, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I remember doing a little bit of COBOL. And I did, and of course, what he found out was it was really hard to do stuff on COBOL because it takes forever. Like downloading a text file was 5 hours. It was a midnight run because there was a lot of data he was going in. So he put everything into Excel, which was not bad. So you can take a text file, throw it into Excel, and then he created this huge collection of macros, queries, and reports. And if you're familiar with Excel, you know you can build all kinds of cool things. And that was his report engine. So basically, he just copied a portion of the COBOL mainframe, built this little system, which spit out reports for him, and you know everyone was happy, right? No documentation whatsoever, because one of the things I learned in government when I first started in state government is knowledge is power. And if I want to keep my job, I'm not going to tell anyone else how to do my job. That's a bad attitude, but that's, you know, we knew a lot of folks that did that. So no documentation. And when I got this and I inherited the database, I had a great team that worked with it, but they were not Excel folks and they were not programmers. And actually what I did at one point is I sent them to Excel class. I said, I'm going to take over your work for 3 days. I'm sending you to Excel class so you guys can do stuff. And that was great for me. 3 days of hell, but when they came back, we were more productive, thankfully. Anyway, I go into this Excel spreadsheet or edifice thing, and he also had Access aligned with it. So there was some Access programming. All right, so Excel and Access were talking back and forth. And I spent about 2 months just trying to understand the system because it was such spaghetti code. You all heard that term before?
Oh, yes.
It was bad program. I mean, this is a fella that knew a little bit. And my team figured out that when they had to update things, they would just go in and they would take out pieces of the macro and they put some dates in here. And I said, well, how do you know to do that? And they said, well, we did this by trial and error. So we would do it. And if something broke, we would go back and try again. I'm like, oh, great. Programming by trial and error. Okay. So no documentation, things, you know, and the system finally ground to a halt because there were so many errors and things pulling up. So I basically spent another 3 months figuring out how can we do this better and also documenting myself every step of the way. So we had a system that if I got hit by the bus, you know, someone could take over for me. And I tell you, the fun thing is once I got this built, people said, oh, we need more spreadsheets. And everything was spreadsheet. And I was trying to move us to a distributed cloud environment, which we actually had space on. And we could do this. But you know, we had people creating spreadsheets from this stuff. And again, what happens when they create spreadsheets? They don't document what they did and they make assumptions. And I got these huge spreadsheets. I didn't know what they did or why they did things they did. So I kept saying, what about knowledge management? Tara, you're going to love this if this works right. But what about knowledge management? Well, we have, wait for it, SharePoint. Right? Of course, we had citizen developers working on SharePoint. So what does that mean? So I always love when people say, oh, we got knowledge management because we have SharePoint. Well, you know how to...
It's not knowledge management. It's
a
tool.
Not? Yeah, exactly. It's like when I used to walk in offices and people say, well, I'm a project manager because they gave me a copy of Microsoft Project. Oh my gosh. The tools do not make the person.
That's right. That's right.
So that was the horror story there. And I was able to get us to a good point and get us actually to a tool. How many of y'all heard of Salesforce?
Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the first low code, no code out there. And that company was a brilliant vision at the time. I remember when they were first starting, it was a brilliant vision of, we don't want you to have to write any code. You just point and click what you want. And we were able to move it that way. And yeah, there's some constraints to it, but it does allow for some good knowledge management pieces. So as I said, we kept walking deeper into the fog until it got us into good knowledge management. Okay. So I'm going to pause right there. How many of you had similar stories like that? Paul, Brenda?
Yeah. In terms of the development and no documentation, I was managing at a consulting firm, a federal contract, and they had developed a software to collect data from grantees all over the country. And it needed upgraded. and it was on a language called Clipper, I believe it was.
Oh, Clipper, yes.
And there was zero documentation of what the original programmers had done, who were no longer anywhere to be found. And so then we brought in this person, and I think they blew through a whole lot of money trying to figure out what made this thing tick, because there was no documentation. So documentation counts.
Absolutely, because I did one project a long time ago when I was in IT. You know, we do a lot of reverse engineering. And this was back when I was in Kentucky, and we had this coal mining lab that ran all these different sample systems. And they had all their scientific equipment running on this mini computer. And the owner, who was a real jerk anyway, basically his nephew or grandson, I can't remember what, ran the computer systems, and they had a fight. So the grandson logic bomb. Do you all know what a logic bomb is?
Yeah.
Okay, so a logic bomb is some kind of bad code in the computer program that will cause issues if you hit the right thing. He logic bombed the entire program, you know, the system, and then I had to go in there and try to reverse engineer the system to find the logic bombs to get them out of there before it blew up their entire scientific laboratory. Not literally blew it up, but you know, basically just it made all the instruments inert. And yeah, reverse engineering is so tough. I can understand why he blew through a lot of money. It's tough because you're trying to think like another person, and it's almost like mind reading. So, Paul, you have any comments, questions? Okay.
Hey, Bill. Yeah.
Oh.
So you mentioned that about the knowledge part. You know, the brain is always asking, you know, how did we get there? How did you get to a point where no one's thinking about documentation and so forth? It's amazing that we're still in that place today. That you know, a lot of times that I show up on a job or a position, and it's either you're going to be SharePoint and knowledge management, two positions. I'm like, you do know there's two different jobs, right? And I find that's a trend today, that organizations don't really have a clear understanding of what knowledge management is. And so when we speak about organizations, I always tell people organizations are made of individuals. So it goes, let's just say what it is. It's individuals understanding what their positions or those positions are and the needs and the requirements. Because I will show up on a job and it's like, you're the knowledge manager. You're like, me? I'm the only person? You're like, wow, wow. And then you deal with the whole cultural thing of trying to change and implement and try to be a player. So it's a continuous uphill battle. You have to have thick skin, and you have to also understand more and more are asking you to know SharePoint. I do know SharePoint, and so I was fortunate to be able to do both. But I always make it clear, you know, hey, which one do you want? Okay, so either I'm going to be a KMer or I'm going to be a SharePoint person.
Right.
So yeah, everything you're saying is still continues today.
Isn't it? Isn't it? It keeps going. And
Yes.
And you're so right about the culture, because a lot of times, and I've actually been pressed into service to go build something. Like I had to do something for one of our programs at OPM, and they needed something really quick, and they didn't want to go through the developer. Said, could you build this for me? Yeah, so I could build you a PHP, which is a web scripting language. I did it in an afternoon for some property assessment stuff we needed to do. And I'll be honest, Paul, I knew better. I should have documented it. I should have told them what I was doing, but they kept saying, no, we need it fast. We need it fast. Do it now. And you know, okay.
Oh yeah. Been there when they said they want it now. And I'm like, I gotta document this. I need to document what I'm doing, all this stuff. I need to test it. I need to go back and forth. No, I need it now. You're like, okay, forget it. Just okay. Now I'm counting down the days and hours of saying, well, I won't be here when someone has to go back and repeat what I just did.
Oh yeah. They just better be glad I was safe crossing the streets. And sometimes crossing the streets in DC is not that safe. So, you know, that's what I have to say. So now what's going on though, is we had these citizen developers and Project Management Institute, and I'm not getting a kickback for this. It's just, I noticed they just jumped into this. And their whole idea is, well, we're seeing this big field of citizen development, and why don't we start bringing some order to chaos? Because there really hasn't been a actual method or process for citizen developers. People just did what they wanted to do. I think the closest that maybe some folks came to is with Salesforce, and they do some certification and they teach you how to use the Salesforce tools, and they have a process. But there's so many tools out there, you know, like I just told you, Google App Sheets tonight, right? App Sheet, and you guys can go out there tonight and you can just create your own process on how you're going to build citizen development apps, right? So they got this book. It just came out a month or so ago, Processes and Best Practices. And I went through their training course, which was really nice, and it was great. But can you all guess what was missing?
Knowledge management.
Absolutely. I went and looked in the index and they only mentioned knowledge once. So here's this whole, and what they're doing here is they're trying to say, okay, we're going to have this like process, and we're going to have a, you know, where you talk to your stakeholders, and we have, you know, we're going to sit down and understand what people need and all this stuff. And we're going to build a nice app for them. Okay. Now I can't show their process. I have my own process I created, which is lean scope project management methodology. And I developed this at OPM to help us with our building our apps and such. So, you know, you're welcome to look at that. But it basically, the whole idea here is, what are we trying to build? Why are we trying to build it? How are we trying to build it? And I tried to build in some knowledge management in here, but you guys can see it's kind of an afterthought thing with mine, because I was asked by the design lab at OPM to basically, the person that was in charge of it said, after we get our prototypes built, we don't know how to scale them up. We don't know how to get them actually out there and being used. So I put in, the design thinking with the prototyping, you know, the lean thinking stuff, and married it with project management, right? So that way you have a system here so you can create something and people can be involved, and you're creating something for your stakeholders. Because again, with that example I gave to you from, you know, that agency I will not name, that person just built that for himself so that he can produce his reports and people won't bother him. So a long, long time ago, when I worked in Kentucky Environmental Protection Cabinet, when I was an environmental paralegal, I was really proud of myself because I citizen developed a bunch of macros. I was a collections paralegal, and I developed a bunch of WordPerfect macros. All I had to do was enter information in once. It would print out for me automatically all the legal documents and everything I needed to garnish wages and seize property. Okay. This was work that if I did it the old way, would take me about a week. Citizen develop apps, a couple of hours, right? So I could kick off the rest of the week and just hang out and do what I wanted to do. And I shouldn't be admitting that now, but you can't catch me. So, you know, it's been over 20 years. So a lot of times the citizen developers did this just to save themselves some time. And what the idea was, the Project Management Institute is to bring a, you know, process here and actually start meeting the needs of the stakeholders, because we have such much a larger impact. But like I said, something is missing though. It's the knowledge management aspect. And what I'd like to do is call you guys, and Tara's heard me do this again. Remember when we got onto Discipline Agile and I said, we need knowledge management in there? Guys, it's the knowledge managers have to come in and help with the citizen develop applications. That's my call to arms on this. Okay.
Cool.
So the rest of the rest of the presentation here, I think I've talked about some problems with citizen development, and you guys have given me some here, but now I'm thinking, what can we do? Can we brainstorm? How can knowledge management help? And back when I was at Social Security, one of the things we did with our programming, we wanted to get away from the Wild West cowboy programmers that just did their own to a more measured process. So we had this capability maturity model, and we had it set up, and it was kind of based on what NASA did with the space shuttle and how NASA would program, you know, systems for the space shuttle, because you didn't want a cowboy programmer, you know, just throwing whatever code they wanted to in the space shuttle and hope it works. You know, you want to have a good measured process and things well documented so that the space shuttle would not be damaged by a bad computer program. And a lot of folks didn't know this. You know, they had 5 separate computers on the space shuttle, right? And when you ran stuff, the computers had to agree with each other. And, you know, you had to have a majority kind of rule there. I think it was like 4 out of the 5 had to agree on something before you could do it. And that kind of redundancy. So giving an example. So I'm going to open this up now. And, you can talk about what are some problems you've seen or some that you've seen in your workplace. And what do you think we can do with knowledge management to help here? How can we make knowledge management a part of citizen development? So who wants to start?
Oh, I'll start. I keep thinking about Agile project management and a lot of those skills, which knowledge management, whenever you're thinking about overlaying Agile on top of it, there's many points where knowledge management just automatically fits. So if you, and in the case of citizen development, you don't want people to be on their own, creating their little tools and just, willy-nilly and on whatever platform they want, and not really people knowing about it, because in theory, you want it to be part of a master plan. That and knowledge management actually helps get that bird's eye view of what we're doing. And we have a problem, and when people are asked to be citizen developers and tackle those problems, it has to be part of a plan. And like I mentioned, Agile, if you're working on several things and you start implementing the Agile pieces, like the stand-ups, everybody talks to each other and finds out what we're doing and how. And just that pre-work does a lot for as far as, okay, you're learning from other people right away. And someone, oh, I've done it that way before. Oh, that didn't work for me. And just having that initial part, that peer assist kind of moment, and in the organization, and everybody can kind of give some feedback. And that's actually something I'm trying to implement, like a solutions roundtable, where people I'm very fortunate. I work for DoD, and in my office, there's a team of knowledge managers. It's like unbelievable. It's like heaven. There's all these knowledge management professionals. And what we do is we help our clients at DSCA with knowledge management issues. And sometimes I think there's a gap where, okay, this is my customer's problem, and I'm not exactly sure which way I should go. Should I go SharePoint, or should it be something we try to do another tool? And I could use maybe some feedback from the team. And so I was trying to format like a kind of a 15-20 minute add-on to our weekly meetings, where I say, okay, who has a project where they're developing a solution, and who wants to throw it to the team just so everybody knows or can contribute. So anyway, but of course, time is the most most important. So making meetings longer is never a happy thing. Right. But I really think it's a gap. I think that there needs to be a much more learn before. And I think that for citizen development, I think that has to be part of it too. Where does this project fit in the grand scheme of all of the office's initiatives? Cool. That's where I would start. Do they talk about that in the class?
Which class?
The citizen development?
No.
At all? No.
There's more like, hey, talk to your stakeholders and build something that their stakeholders will want, And the first thing is you come in there as the knowledge manager and say, well, you're harshing my creativity. I got a problem to solve. I don't got time for this, making me document everything. I can see the first feedback. Anyone else? Jamie, Brenda, Paul?
Well, one of the things I saw was how do you avoid the duplication?
Oh, yes.
So everybody goes to the Excel class, and then you get 15 different spreadsheets
Mm-hmm.
or 15 different apps, and they all kind of do the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody's talking to anybody.
Wow, you sound like you've worked at OPM.
No, I worked at FDA.
Okay. At OPM one time, we did a survey and we found out we had 22 knowledge management systems. And they would range from Excel Access to something Power Sheets or something. I forgot what it's called. Yeah, exactly. It's like everyone was, oh, I'm special. I want my own app.
Right.
Yeah. And there was so much duplication.
And there's resistance to making the app part of the main stream.
Mm-hmm.
This is mine. I did it. My group uses it. It doesn't matter whether or not it's another group that would benefit from it. And it is squirreled away on a hard drive.
Mm-hmm.
So if the computer, somehow the laptop got stolen, I don't know what happened to all of that work.
Yep.
That's part of the plan. Where are we putting these things once they're done? Who
Oh,
can
yeah.
access them? Who knows who can access them? I love it when I find SharePoint creations that are beautiful and they look wonderful and they're very useful and
Mm-hmm.
nobody used them. So they forgot about it. How sad is that?
Yeah. Paul, I see you're wanting to say something.
Yeah, I'm listening. We all have experienced that. Tara, congratulations that you actually have an office of knowledge managers there. I am jealous.
Telling you.
I'm so jealous. I'm
Yes.
typically like a lone ranger. Every
Yep.
time I show up at a location, I always ask, how mature is the position? What's the culture like? And it seems to be, well, we're just starting out. We're just starting out.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? It's like, well, we only had one person there, and that one person is not actually a KMer, happened to be in a different skill set, but happened to be in KM. And you're like, interesting. But how can we help with the problem of citizen development? I hate to say it, KM needs to be buddies with everyone. We need to be in everyone's business. We need to be chummy with every department or everyone that's our customer or who we're supposed to support. We have to engage and integrate ourselves and embed ourselves into all of the our internal customers or external customers, whichever it may be. And we have to, as I always say, you're not going to be invited to the big table. I've accepted that in my SharePoint roles, in my KM roles. You're lucky if you get a seat in the room around the wall to be able to listen and read and hear the tea leaves of indirectly saying things that you can say, okay, they didn't tell me that I need to do this, but what I'm hearing is I need to probably be involved in that. And then inject yourself into it to be able to be a player and a contributor saying, guess what I can offer you? I can help you with this. Because part of the education or lack of education of what is KM, we know it's fluid. Every organization tends to run it the way they want to, or vision, or may not even have an idea of how to run it. And it becomes so fluid that you have to constantly get there and sell services to your customers of saying, guess what I can do for you? And I had an experience with that of being in an organization that we didn't promote our capabilities and services. And I kept looking and saying that, oh, this would be a short-lived job at this location because I don't see the value added, because I kept asking, what's the value added of what we're doing here? Is the customer asking for this? Are we pushing the service or are we pulling the service? Which one, what are we doing? And we was pushing things that they didn't ask for. So looking at how can KM help, we have to when we see things or products being developed, we have to change our mentality and say, hey, I want to be your buddy. I want to be your friend. I want to know, how did you do this? Now, of course, that takes some skill on our behalf of being friendly and make it seem that we're not being intrusive, but we're friendly, we're helpful. So we want to listen to who's talking to who and what they're talking about in order for us to be able to get involved and say, man, I'm glad I was able to help. But if I wasn't actively seeking to help, we will be in this position of things out of control.
Yep.
That's it.
That's a great point. Now, my next question is, how do you find these citizen developers? Where are they?
So, yeah, where are they? I mean, if you stay at an organization long enough, you may get lucky. Well, I used to ask one of my friends. One of my friends worked for state. He works for state traffic. He works for he's a state employee, and he's working as a traffic engineer. And I asked him about that. He said they had similar problems with the teams not talking or the departments not talking. And I said, well, why don't you guys go and liaison and sit in those meetings that of the groups that you're supporting and ask, can you come and sit? Because what they're finding, they're reacting a lot. So, and you can get, if you get an opportunity to go to these meetings and so forth, you may be able to find who these people are. You maybe even ask, hopefully, leadership in those departments, who are their SMEs and who are their SMEs and informal leaders or formal leaders or what it may be. But that would be my approach. But yeah.
No, I think that's a great approach.
Well, that's kind of how my manager is asking us all to embed ourselves with our customers and go to the weekly meetings and get involved with them and make sure that we have like a slick sheet of all the KM products that we can create. And we also have a capability maturity model that's modeled after APQC's maturity model. And that's something that we can go through with our customer and say, and it lets them evaluate themselves about where are we in the KM capability. Are we doing this? Do we have content managers who are trained to update our content on the various places? It has a whole bunch of measures where you can say, you can actually show improvement. If you do a CMM assessment at the beginning of the year with your customer, you have these numbers that say, okay, where are we? And you're rated at certain numbers. They rate themselves. Then you do it a year later with the same people. You have increase in those numbers, and that's where you show improvement. And it's a really effective thing, because a lot of times with KM, it's hard to show the benefit, right? And that's one of the things that we're trying to do with all our customers. It's hard because, again, it takes time. You have to get people to sit and think and interact, and it doesn't take that much time, however. But if you do it and then you do it again, you can see the difference, and it does show improvement.
Jamie, you've been kind of quiet, so I was wondering if you had some thoughts.
Sure, a lot of thoughts. A lot of great points, a lot of great things. So I think, first thing I think of is, in the last few months with KMCDC, we've been talking about community and how knowledge managers build community. And I've heard tonight that, talking about building relationships with people, having, being embedded if you can. And there's lots of different kind of situations that people who are in knowledge management positions are in. Either they really are embedded and they're part of a staff, like I had that. In my experience, I started as a contractor and then ended up becoming a civilian who then had a team of 9 knowledge management specialists that were all over the Pacific. And each of them were working independently, with the exception of my team that was in Hawaii, because there were a couple of them. But their job and my job was really to like keep the leadership, who was really in charge of all of what we were doing, understanding the value proposition, right? And my job was to make sure that the $2 million that the fleet spent every year on knowledge management was spent every year on knowledge management. But I would say the majority of our work, some of it was luck in having great leadership, but a lot of it was persistence in making sure that we were always listening everywhere. It was kind of like, in some cases, I would say maybe we seemed like the town gossips or something. Not that we were gossiping, but we were just kind of in everybody's business, right? Like, what are you doing? And it didn't matter what it was. It was, but you end up finding out through these relationships, what are people building, And so part of my thought about citizen development is that, yeah, right away, you don't want to discourage citizen development. I think that knowing that there are citizen developers present indicates that there's a need for something. There is a lack of something. So becoming familiar with who is identifying needs and making solutions, I think that's great. I think from the standpoint of a knowledge manager who builds communities, and we talked about, and you asked a good question, Bill, about like, what's the difference between like a team and a community, right? Community of practice, this is Winger trainer. They said that a team is, organized around a task. A community is organized around value, right? And it doesn't mean that the team doesn't have value, but communities are organized themselves around value. And I think citizen developers, while they're doing a task by creating these things, they would potentially organize around values, right? They want to be problem solvers. They want to create their own solutions. So I think having, as a knowledge manager, you could encourage the development of a citizen development community in your organization. And if you are in the right position and are, have the ear of leadership, you might also suggest that it become part of the strategy of your organization, because there's IT solutions being thrown at us and bought all the time. But, if there's citizen developers out there in the organization, why not make that a part of the formal strategy and how we address problems, and potentially, kind of start innovating around the problems that we have before we make large investments? Because you definitely want to get a hold of the people doing all the work, like duplication of effort. That right away is a measurable value that you can say cost, waste, time, money. That gets people's ears up. And then also, there's like the value of like the human capital that you have, who the power of innovation, who really is thinking, and then, there is a value to that, also can be measured. So I see that there's a lot of potential with this, and I see this as a good thing. And I think knowledge managers can mostly participate by connecting, by creating community and connecting those people with each other, and identifying what the gaps and potential solutions are.
Cool. Yeah, I think citizen development is I agree with you, it's a good thing, because I like it, but also being on the other side, the tools they have now are so powerful, and they can, it's not just a spreadsheet or a database anymore. You can create some pretty powerful tools with point and click. And if not done, correctly, or if you're not taking the infrastructure in place, and I've had my hand smacked by cybersecurity too, because sometimes I get enthusiastic and I don't really think about the security implications, which I should, but you can see that, right? So it's like you want to encourage, but you want to encourage in a good way. You don't kill the creativity.
Right. And I think that's the benefit of creating a community of people who do this, because then you can communicate to them, hey, here are kind of some guidelines for, here's really the boundaries we have to consider, security being one of them, redundancy being another, but emphasizing the value over the, squashing people.
Brenda, I see you, do you have anything to say, Brenda?
Yeah, I was along that line of community, not just for providing sort of oversight and coordination. I found that establishing communities, like we had a Tableau data visualization, was coming into FDA, and he found that there were users kind of springing up all over the place. And by getting them together in to be able to know, number one, who had access to the tools, what were people doing, and sharing knowledge among the members was a way to find out what was going on without being intrusive. And that they were able to see benefit from getting together with the other groups, especially if they ran into challenges. They knew who to talk to in order to get their data visualization to look the way that they wanted to. Same thing for SharePoint super users, and just to form those help form those communities and help manage them, so that people can become better citizen developers.
Great, yeah. So I have, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
See this as getting in the way, but as supporting them and doing what they're trying to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And I love the Tableau example. I saw that kind of creativity burst come when we got Tableau. So I have 8:16, and I pretty much finished my presentation. I think this has been a great roundtable. So if you guys want to continue, or Tara, if you have anything else you want to say before, I'm glad to continue the discussion all night, but I don't want to bore you all to sleep.
Yeah, my voice is such that I have put many students to sleep, and people who listen to me. So I'm fine with stopping. Just want to thank everybody for coming, and please come again. We try and do this every single month, usually on the 4th Thursday of the month. This is the 5th, but if you belong to our community on Meetup, you'll automatically get invitations. And we've been doing this since July of 2013. So we have the staying power. And I think it's very important, and I'm so pleased that I have wonderful people like Jamie and Bill who basically have helped lead this group, and I encourage you to come again and maybe present one time. Let us know, because if you have something to share, maybe you should be the one who's talking about it in our meeting. That would be wonderful. So we're talking about knowledge management, and so thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming.
Stop sharing.